The early morning sunlight streamed through the massive glass windows of Atlanta International Airport, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Dr. Maya Thompson rushed through the terminal, her wheeled suitcase clicking rhythmically against the tiles. She was cutting it close, again, but when a last-minute complication had arisen with her patient's post-surgery recovery, there was no way she could have left any earlier. Just another day in the life of a heart surgeon, she muttered to herself, checking her watch. She had exactly 47 minutes until her flight to Chicago took off. The medical conference couldn't wait, even if her patient's irregular heartbeat had demanded an extra hour of her attention. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from her mom lit up the screen. "Baby girl, knock them dead at that conference. Show them what brilliant doctors look like." A warm smile spread across her face. After 15 years of practicing medicine, her mom still sent encouraging messages before every major presentation. The security line moved surprisingly quickly. Maybe luck was on her side today. As she gathered her belongings on the other side of the scanner, Maya caught her reflection in a nearby window. Her cream-colored blazer was still crisp, thanks to careful packing, and her natural hair was neatly styled in a professional updo. She looked every bit the accomplished doctor she was, even if some people still did a double take when they learned about her position. At the gate, Maya pulled out her laptop, determined to review her presentation one last time. The keynote speech she was scheduled to deliver tomorrow had been months in the making. Her research on minimally invasive cardiac procedures in high-risk patients could change how surgeons approached complicated cases. She'd poured her heart into this work, staying late at the hospital countless nights, analyzing data until her eyes burned. Final boarding call for first-class passengers on Flight 257 to Chicago, the gate agent announced. Maya gathered her things, double-checking that she had her lucky pen, the same one she used to sign her medical school acceptance letter years ago. Some habits die hard. As she made her way down the jet bridge, Maya thought about how far she'd come from her childhood days in a small Georgia town. Her father, a high school science teacher, had sparked her love for medicine by bringing home medical journals from the library. Her mother, who cleaned houses to help pay for Maya's college applications, had taught her that dignity and determination could move mountains. Settling into her first-class seat, a splurge she allowed herself for longer flights, Maya pulled out the medical journal containing her latest published paper. The familiar smell of the glossy pages helped calm her pre-presentation nerves. Around her, other passengers filed in, business people in suits, a couple of elderly tourists, and what looked like a young family heading for vacation. She was just getting absorbed in double-checking her citation list when a commotion near the front of the plane caught her attention. A loud, authoritative voice was carrying through the cabin, but Maya remained focused on her work. Years of operating room experience had taught her to tune out distractions. Little did she know that this particular distraction was about to turn her routine flight into something entirely unexpected. The plane's engines hummed to life as Maya jotted down a few last-minute notes. Tomorrow's presentation would highlight not just her research, but represent something bigger, the changing face of modern medicine. She thought about all the young girls who might see her on that stage and realized that their dreams of becoming a doctor weren't so far-fetched after all. The flight attendant stopped by her seat, offering a pre-takeoff drink. "Water, please," Maya responded with a smile. As she waited, she pulled up a photo on her phone. A group picture from last week's successful surgery. Her team had saved a father of three's life with an emergency procedure. Moments like those reminded her why she'd chosen this challenging path. A shadow fell across her tray table, and Maya looked up, about to encounter a situation that would test her professional composure in ways all her years of medical training couldn't have prepared her for. The next few hours would not only challenge her patience, but would also give her an unexpected platform to demonstrate the true meaning of dignity under pressure. The shadow lingering over Maya's tray table belonged to a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His presence commanded attention, the kind of attention that came from years of people jumping at his every word. This was Richard Warner, though Maya didn't know it yet. As CEO of a major tech company, he was used to things going his way, and today would challenge that expectation in ways he never anticipated. Warner's expression shifted from confusion to displeasure as he double-checked his ticket. There must be some mistake, he announced loudly, not speaking to anyone in particular, but ensuring everyone could hear. He waved his hand dismissively at Maya, who was still focused on her medical journal, trying to ignore the commotion. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice carrying through the cabin. "Flight attendant." The way he snapped his fingers made several nearby passengers wince. A flight attendant, whose name tag read Linda, approached with a professional smile. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" "There seems to be a mix-up with the seating arrangements," Warner stated, gesturing toward Maya's seat. "I'm sure this isn't right." The implied meaning behind his words hung heavy in the air. Maya finally looked up, her years of handling difficult situations in the operating room evident in her calm demeanor. Linda checked both their tickets, her experienced eyes confirming what she already knew. "Sir, both seats are correctly assigned. Is there something specific I can help you with?" Her tone was polite but firm, years of dealing with difficult passengers reflected in her composure. Warner's face reddened slightly. "Look," he lowered his voice to what he probably thought was a whisper, but his words carried clearly to surrounding passengers. "I paid full price for first class. I'm sure there's been some sort of upgrade confusion." He glanced pointedly at Maya again. A young woman across the aisle pulled out her phone, pretending to text but obviously recording the interaction. An elderly gentleman a few rows ahead turned around, frowning at Warner's behavior. Maya remained focused on her journal, her only reaction a slight tightening of her grip on the pages. "Sir," Linda began again, "all our first-class passengers have paid full price for their seats. Now, if you'd like to take your assigned seat, we can begin our departure preparations." She gestured to his seat next to Maya, her smile never wavering but her eyes conveying a clear message. Warner reluctantly sat down, making a show of adjusting his expensive suit and pulling out his phone. "I'll be speaking to your corporate office about this," he muttered, loud enough for Linda to hear as she walked away. He then proceeded to make several loud phone calls, each one seemingly designed to broadcast his importance to everyone within earshot. "Yes, tell the board I'll be slightly delayed." No, just some airline inefficiency. You know how these things go." "Yes, well, when you're running a billion-dollar company, these little inconveniences can be quite tedious." Maya continued reviewing her presentation, years of performing complex surgeries under pressure having taught her the art of concentration amid chaos. Her phone buzzed again. A message from one of her residents about the post-op patient she checked on before leaving. She quickly typed a response, her medical expertise evident in her swift, decisive instructions. Warner paused his phone conversation long enough to watch this exchange, his eyebrows rising slightly as he caught glimpses of medical terminology on her screen. Maya was still wearing her hospital ID badge, the words Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery clearly visible, but Warner seemed determined to maintain his assumptions. As the flight prepared for takeoff, more passengers filed past their row. Several recognized Warner, their expressions changing from recognition to discomfort as they witnessed his behavior. A young medical student who had been reading one of Maya's published papers for her residency applications walked past and did a double take, clearly starstruck at seeing the author in person. "Dr. Thompson," the student whispered excitedly, clutching her medical textbook. "I just read your paper on innovative approaches to valve replacement in high-risk patients. It's absolutely brilliant." Before Maya could respond, Warner let out an exaggerated sigh and muttered something about having to endure the entire flight. The student's face fell, but Maya gave her a warm, encouraging smile. "Thank you," she said clearly. "Keep pursuing your dreams in medicine. We need dedicated young doctors like you." The plane began its taxi to the runway, the engines humming to life. Warner shifted uncomfortably in his seat, pointedly pulling out an eye mask and noise-canceling headphones. The irony of him trying to create a barrier between himself and the situation wasn't lost on the surrounding passengers, several of whom were now openly watching the scene unfold. Little did anyone know that this tense beginning was just the precursor to a flight that would change perspectives and challenge preconceptions in unexpected ways. As the plane lifted off the ground, Maya returned to her medical journals, unaware that in just a few hours, her expertise would be needed in a way that would leave everyone on this flight, including the pompous CEO beside her, completely speechless. The flight had reached its cruising altitude, but the tension in first class continued to climb. Warner had spent the first hour making a series of increasingly loud business calls, despite the flight attendant's polite reminders about phone usage. Each conversation seemed designed to showcase his importance, with frequent mentions of board meetings, quarterly profits, and corporate takeovers. Maya maintained her focus on her work, occasionally making notes in the margins of her research papers. Her phone lit up with a photo from her hospital team. They'd sent a picture of her patient's latest test results, all showing positive improvement. A small smile crossed her face as she typed a quick response to thank them for their dedication. The man sitting across the aisle, a retired teacher named Mr. Chen, had been watching the situation unfold with growing disapproval. He'd spent 40 years in education, teaching high school chemistry, and had seen enough bullying behavior to recognize it in any form. He caught Maya's eye and gave her a sympathetic nod, which she returned with grace. Would anyone like refreshments? Linda, the flight attendant, had returned with the beverage cart. Maya requested water with lemon, while Warner barely looked up from his laptop as he demanded premium whiskey, his tone making it clear he expected special treatment. As Linda poured his drink, Warner's laptop screen displayed a news article about his company. The headline read, "Tech Giant's Revolutionary New Product Launch," with his photo prominently featured. He deliberately tilted the screen so others could see it, clearing his throat loudly. "You know," he announced to no one in particular, "it's important to maintain certain standards in business. Not everyone understands what it takes to reach the top. Some people just don't belong in certain positions." His words trailed off as he cast a pointed glance at Maya. A young businessman a few rows ahead removed his headphones, turning around with a frown. He'd been following Warner's company in the news, but this display was quickly changing his opinion of the famous CEO. Several other passengers exchanged uncomfortable looks, the kind of silent communication that happens when strangers unite in a disapproval of bad behavior. Maya took a sip of her water, her mind drifting to tomorrow's presentation. She'd be speaking to hundreds of medical professionals about breakthrough surgical techniques that could save countless lives. A small part of her wished Warner could see her in that moment, commanding the attention of an entire conference hall, sharing innovations that would change modern medicine. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, causing Warner to spill some of his whiskey on his expensive suit. He immediately pressed the call button, demanding assistance. "This is unacceptable," he snapped as Linda approached. "Do you know how much this suit costs? I expect the airline to cover the cleaning bills." "Of course, sir," Linda replied professionally. "I'll be happy to provide you with a claim form." She handed him some napkins, maintaining her composure despite his attitude. Maya noticed Linda's hands trembling slightly as she turned away. It couldn't be easy dealing with such behavior day after day. Another flight attendant, David, passed through the cabin checking on passengers. He paused briefly by Maya's seat, having overheard some of Warner's earlier comments. "Dr. Thompson," he said clearly, "would you like a pillow or blanket for your flight?" His deliberate use of her title didn't go unnoticed by nearby passengers. Warner's head snapped up at the word doctor, but he quickly masked his surprise with a scoff. "These days they hand out titles like candy," he muttered, just loud enough to be heard. A woman in a business suit across the aisle rolled her eyes at his comment, then deliberately pulled out the in-flight magazine featuring an article about diversity in corporate leadership. The flight was now 2 hours in, and the atmosphere remained charged with unspoken tension. Maya had switched from her research papers to reviewing patient files on her tablet. Each swipe of her finger revealed complex cardiac scans and surgical plans, life-saving procedures she had pioneered. Warner, meanwhile, had moved on to loudly critiquing the airline's service to anyone within earshot. Mr. Chen, the retired teacher, had started filling out a customer feedback form, carefully documenting the behavior he'd witnessed. A young couple seated nearby were quietly discussing the situation, the wife explaining to her husband how she'd faced similar treatment in her own professional life. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the afternoon sun hit the right side of the plane. Through the window, Maya could see the landscape below, a patchwork of fields and cities that reminded her of how far she'd come from her small-town beginnings. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her team back at the hospital. They'd sent a photo of her office door, where they'd hung a good luck banner for her conference presentation. Little did anyone know that the next few minutes would transform this tense situation into something none of them expected. As the plane continued its journey toward Chicago, the true test of character and professional excellence was about to unfold, and everyone aboard was about to learn a powerful lesson about judgment and assumptions. The first sign that something was wrong came from the back of the plane. A flight attendant was walking quickly through the aisle, trying not to alarm other passengers. But Maya, trained to notice subtle changes in emergency situations, caught the concern in the young woman's expression. "Is everything all right?" Maya asked quietly as the flight attendant passed. Before she could answer, another crew member hurried forward, medical kit in hand. They exchanged worried glances, and Maya could tell from their body language that something serious was happening. Then came the announcement that would change everything. "If there are any medical professionals on board, please press your call button immediately." Maya's finger was on the button before the announcement finished. Warner looked up from his laptop, watching with mild interest as she pressed it. "Really?" he scoffed. "Let's wait for a real doctor to respond." The flight attendants rushed to Maya's seat. Linda's relief was visible when she saw the call button. "Aren't you a doctor?" she asked hopefully. Before Maya could answer, Warner cut in. "Shouldn't we wait for someone more?" He paused, choosing his words. "Qualified?" Maya stood up calmly, her voice clear and professional. "I'm Dr. Thompson, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Atlanta General. What's the situation?" The authority in her tone left no room for doubt. Warner's mouth hung open slightly, but Maya was already following the flight attendants to the back of the plane. An elderly man was slumped in his seat, his wife holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "He just started clutching his chest," she explained, her voice shaking. "He's had heart problems before, but nothing like this." Maya's training kicked in instantly. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, already checking his pulse. His skin was clammy, his breathing labored. She recognized the signs immediately. Possible heart attack. "I need the medical kit," she commanded, and David quickly handed it over. Maya's movements were swift and precise as she pulled out the necessary equipment. "How long has he been experiencing symptoms?" she asked the wife while checking his blood pressure. "About 10 minutes," the wife answered. "He said he felt pressure in his chest, then pain in his left arm." Maya nodded, her mind already running through treatment protocols. She could feel dozens of eyes on her from throughout the cabin. Warner had moved to the edge of his seat, watching the scene unfold with increasing disbelief. "Linda, I need you to contact Ground Medical Services immediately," Maya instructed. "Tell them we have a possible cardiac event. Male patient, approximately 70 years old, showing classic heart attack symptoms." Her voice was steady, her movements confident. The medical kit contained basic emergency medications. Maya quickly assessed what she had to work with. "Sir, I'm going to give you some medication. This will help with the pain and thin your blood slightly to prevent clotting. Can you nod if you understand?" The man managed a weak nod. His wife squeezed his hand tighter. Maya administered the medication with expert precision, then began monitoring his vital signs closely. Every few minutes, she checked his pulse, blood pressure, and breathing, making mental notes of any changes. "Ground Medical Services are asking for your assessment, Doctor," Linda called from the crew phone. Maya provided a detailed report of the patient's condition, using medical terminology that made Warner sink further into his seat with each passing word. She recommended an emergency landing at the nearest airport with cardiac facilities. "The closest airport is Cleveland," the pilot announced over the intercom. "We'll be making an emergency landing in approximately 20 minutes. Throughout the descent, Maya stayed with her patient, monitoring his condition and providing constant reassurance to both him and his wife. She explained each step of what was happening in clear, simple terms, her bedside manner as impeccable as her medical skills. The other passengers watched in amazement as she worked. The young medical student who had recognized Maya earlier was taking mental notes, inspired by the doctor's calm efficiency in a crisis. Mr. Chen, the retired teacher, nodded approvingly, while the businesswoman who had rolled her eyes at Warner earlier smiled with satisfaction. As the plane began its descent into Cleveland, Maya prepared her patient for transport. "The emergency medical team will be waiting for us," she explained to the wife. "I'll brief them on everything that's happened and make sure they have all the information they need for proper treatment." Warner remained unusually quiet, watching as Maya continued to handle the emergency with expertise that couldn't be denied. The same hands he had judged so harshly hours earlier were now potentially saving someone's life. The plane touched down smoothly, and within minutes, emergency medical personnel were boarding. Maya gave them a precise, professional handoff, describing everything she'd done and observed. The paramedics listened attentively, clearly impressed by her thorough care and expertise. As they prepared to transfer the patient, his wife grabbed Maya's hand. "Thank you, doctor," she said, her eyes filled with tears. "We were so lucky to have you on this flight." Maya smiled warmly. "You're very welcome. The emergency team will take excellent care of him now." She wrote her contact information on a piece of paper. "Please let me know how he's doing once you're settled." The other passengers broke into spontaneous applause as Maya made her way back to her seat. She accepted their appreciation with grace, but her mind was already on following up about her patient's condition. As she sat down, Warner shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the weight of his earlier behavior hanging heavy in the air. After the emergency landing in Cleveland, the plane waited for clearance to continue its journey to Chicago. The atmosphere in the cabin had completely transformed. The same first-class section that had earlier been filled with tension was now buzzing with quiet conversations about what they'd just witnessed. Maya sat quietly, updating her hospital team about the delay and making notes about the emergency treatment she provided. Her detailed documentation was a habit formed through years of medical practice, every decision, every medication, every response carefully recorded. A young flight attendant brought her a fresh cup of tea. "It's our special blend," she said softly. "Thank you for what you did back there." The pilot's voice came over the intercom, updating passengers about their status. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received word that our patient has been safely transported to Cleveland Memorial Hospital. Their cardiac unit has been fully briefed, and initial reports are positive. We'll be departing for Chicago in approximately 40 minutes." A quiet murmur of relief spread through the cabin. Several passengers used their phones to search for Maya's name, discovering her impressive list of medical achievements, published papers, and life-saving surgical techniques. The young medical student who had recognized her earlier was now sharing information about Maya's groundbreaking research with her seatmate. Warner sat stiffly in his seat, his earlier arrogance deflated. His phone kept buzzing with business notifications, but for once, he wasn't broadcasting his conversations to the entire cabin. The expensive whiskey he'd demanded earlier sat untouched on his tray table. An elderly woman stopped by their row on her way back from the restroom. She looked directly at Maya. "I saw how you handled that crisis, doctor. My late husband was a physician for 40 years, and I recognize that kind of skill and composure. You remind me of him." Her eyes were warm with appreciation and memory. Linda, the flight attendant who had dealt with Warner's earlier behavior, was now coordinating with ground staff about their departure time. She made a point of addressing Maya with extra respect, though Maya insisted it wasn't necessary. "Doctor, is there anything you need before we take off again?" The businesswoman who had witnessed Warner's earlier behavior was typing rapidly on her laptop. Those seated nearby could see she was drafting an email to her company's board about investing in medical technology firms, specifically mentioning the importance of diverse leadership in healthcare innovation. Mr. Chen, the retired teacher, had spent the wait time writing a detailed letter to the airline, but not the complaint Warner had threatened earlier. Instead, he was commending the crew's handling of the emergency and specifically praising how Maya's presence had made a critical difference. A mother traveling with her young daughter walked past, and the little girl shyly handed Maya a drawing she'd made during the wait. It showed a figure in a white coat with the words "My Hero" written in crayon across the top. Maya's eyes softened as she accepted the picture, remembering her own childhood dreams of becoming a doctor. The ground crew finished their safety checks, and the pilot announced they were ready for takeoff. Maya's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Cleveland Memorial Hospital. The patient was stable and responding well to treatment. His wife had shared how lucky they were to have had a top cardiothoracic surgeon on board. Maya sent back care instructions and her contact information for follow-up consultation. As the plane taxied for takeoff, passengers who had witnessed Maya's calm expertise during the crisis were sharing their experiences on social media. One post read, just witnessed an amazing doctor save a life mid-flight. Reminded me that real heroes don't wear capes, they wear stethoscopes. The young medical student gathered her courage and approached Maya's seat again. "Dr. Thompson," she said quietly, "watching you work today, it showed me exactly why I want to be a doctor. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about your surgical residency program?" Maya's face lit up with genuine warmth. She remembered being that young student full of dreams and determination. "Of course," she replied, gesturing to an empty seat nearby. "Tell me what interests you about cardiothoracic surgery." Warner watched this interaction from behind his laptop screen, his expression unreadable. The same professional he had dismissed hours earlier was now inspiring the next generation of doctors. The irony wasn't lost on the other passengers, several of whom were still sending admiring glances in Maya's direction. The plane climbed back into the sky, continuing its journey to Chicago. Maya spent the remainder of the flight sharing insights with the aspiring medical student, her passion for medicine evident in every word. She talked about the challenges and rewards of surgery, the importance of perseverance, and how every patient taught her something new. Other passengers found excuses to walk past their row, some stopping to express their appreciation or share their own stories of medical professionals who had impacted their lives. The atmosphere had shifted from one of discrimination to one of admiration and respect. Through it all, Maya maintained her professional demeanor, handling the attention with the same grace she'd shown during the medical emergency. Her focus remained on what mattered most, the well-being of her patient and the opportunity to mentor a future doctor. As the sun began to set outside the airplane windows, casting a golden glow across the cabin, it was clear to everyone on board that they had witnessed something powerful, not just a medical emergency response, but a lesson in dignity, expertise, and the triumph of professional excellence over prejudice. The Chicago skyline appeared through the airplane windows as they began their final descent. The events of the flight had spread throughout the cabin, with passengers from economy class finding excuses to walk past first class, hoping to catch a glimpse of the doctor who'd saved a life mid-flight. Maya's phone lit up with another update from Cleveland Memorial Hospital. The patient was doing well, already making jokes with the nursing staff. His wife had sent a photo of him giving a thumbs up from his hospital bed, along with a message that brought tears to Maya's eyes. "You didn't just save his life, you saved our whole world. Thank you." Warner had been unusually quiet since the emergency landing. His laptop remained closed, his phone silenced. The man who had commanded so much attention earlier now seemed lost in thought, stealing occasional glances at Maya as she continued mentoring the young medical student. Linda, the flight attendant, passed through the cabin one last time before landing. "Dr. Thompson," she said, handing Maya a sealed envelope, "our crew put this together for you." Inside was a handwritten thank you note signed by every crew member, along with a voucher for unlimited first-class upgrades for the next year. The businessman who had been recording Warner's earlier behavior approached Maya's seat. "Doctor, I'm on the board of several hospitals," he said quietly. "Your handling of today's emergency was exceptional. Would you be interested in consulting with our medical staff about emergency response protocols?" Before Maya could respond, another passenger chimed in, a woman who had been sitting quietly in the corner. "I'm a journalist with the Chicago Tribune," she said. "Would you consider letting me write about what happened today? Stories like this need to be told." Maya thanked them both graciously but turned the conversation to the importance of emergency medical training and having proper equipment on flights. Her humility in the face of recognition only added to the respect she'd earned. The young medical student had been furiously taking notes on her phone. "Dr. Thompson, what you did today, that's exactly the kind of doctor I want to be. Someone who stays calm under pressure and treats everyone with dignity, no matter what." A light chime indicated they were beginning their final approach. Warner suddenly straightened in his seat, seeming to come to a decision. He turned to Maya, speaking for the first time since the emergency. "Dr. Thompson," he began, his voice lacking its earlier arrogance. I owe you an apology. My behavior earlier was inexcusable. Watching you work today," he paused, struggling to find the right words. "You showed me how wrong my assumptions were." Maya looked at him steadily, her expression professional but kind. From her bag, she pulled out a business card, not just any card, but one that listed her complete credentials. chief of cardiothoracic surgery, multiple medical board positions, and her pioneering research achievements. "Mr. Warner," she replied, having recognized him from his earlier phone conversations, "I accept your apology, and I hope today has shown you something important. Excellence comes in many forms, and assumptions can blind us to incredible talent." Other passengers who had witnessed Warner's earlier behavior watched this exchange with interest. The businessman who had been recording quickly put away his phone, deciding that capturing this moment of genuine remorse wasn't necessary. As the plane touched down in Chicago, Mr. Chen, the retired teacher, stood up from his seat. "You know," he said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, "I taught science for 40 years. I always told my students that real learning happens when we're forced to confront our prejudices. Today was a masterclass in that lesson." The plane taxied to the gate, and passengers began gathering their belongings. Maya received another message. The Cleveland Hospital was interested in consulting with her about their cardiac care protocols. The patient's successful treatment had opened up unexpected opportunities for improving emergency medical care. Several business travelers who had witnessed everything exchanged contact information, discussing how they could promote better diversity and inclusion in their own companies. The incident had sparked important conversations about workplace assumptions and the need for change. Warner pulled out his own business card, hesitated, then offered it to Maya. "Our company's healthcare division is developing new medical technology," he said. "We could really use your expertise. Would you consider being part of our advisory board?" Maya accepted his card with professional courtesy. "I'll consider it," she said. "My schedule is quite full with surgery and research, but I'm always interested in advances that could help patients." As passengers began to deplane, the flight crew made one final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we want to extend a special thank you to Dr. Thompson for her extraordinary assistance today. She represents the highest standards of both medical care and human dignity." Spontaneous applause broke out again. Maya gathered her things, including the crayon drawing from the little girl and the crew's thank you note. As she stood to leave, she handed the young medical student her card. "Send me your residency application," she said with a warm smile. "We need more doctors who understand that medicine is about both skill and compassion." The Chicago terminal was busy with afternoon traffic, but as Maya walked through the jet bridge, she knew this flight had changed more than just one patient's life. It had challenged assumptions, opened dialogues, and shown that sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice is simply doing your job with excellence. The next morning dawned bright and clear in Chicago. Maya stood at the podium of the medical conference, looking out at hundreds of eager faces. The events of yesterday's flight had spread quickly through social media and medical circles, adding an unexpected layer of attention to her keynote speech. She began her presentation not with her planned introduction, but with a story about the emergency on the flight. "Yesterday reminded me why we chose this path," she told the packed auditorium. "Every moment as a doctor is an opportunity to break barriers and save lives." In the front row, she spotted the young medical student from the flight who had arrived early to secure a seat. Several rows back sat Warner, who had made an unexpected appearance. He looked different today, humbler, more thoughtful. His company's PR team had been working overtime since videos of his behavior had started circulating online. Maya's presentation was a masterpiece of medical innovation, but it was her message about dignity and determination that really captured the audience. "Excellence doesn't ask permission to exist," she said, drawing knowing nods from many in attendance. "It simply shows up and does the work." During the coffee break, a group of medical students surrounded her, asking questions not just about surgery, but about handling workplace challenges. Maya shared stories from her early career, offering guidance that went beyond medical techniques to address the human side of healthcare. Her phone buzzed with updates from Cleveland. Her flight patient was making an excellent recovery. The hospital board had formally requested her input on improving their emergency response protocols. What had started as an unfortunate encounter was transforming into opportunities for systemic change. The conference organizers asked Maya to add another session specifically about emergency response in unusual situations. The room was packed as she broke down her decision-making process during the flight, turning a dramatic incident into a valuable teaching moment for hundreds of healthcare professionals. Back at Warner's company, things were changing too. An emergency board meeting had been called to address the viral videos of his behavior. Instead of trying to bury the story, Warner surprised everyone by taking full responsibility. He announced a new company-wide initiative focusing on diversity in medical technology, backing it with significant funding. The airline's corporate office released a statement praising Maya's actions and announcing enhanced medical training for all flight crews. They'd also launched a program to better stock medical supplies on flights, naming it after the patient whose life Maya had saved. Local news stations picked up the story not for its controversy, but for its message of triumph over prejudice. Maya's hospital saw a surge in residency applications, particularly from young doctors who had faced similar challenges in their careers. The young medical student who had witnessed everything on the flight was accepted into Maya's residency program, where she would go on to become a brilliant surgeon in her own right. Years later, she would tell her own students about the flight that showed her what kind of doctor she wanted to be. Mr. Chen, the retired teacher, wrote a powerful letter to the editor of his local paper, describing how Maya's handling of the situation provided a masterclass in responding to discrimination with excellence. The letter went viral, sparking discussions in teachers' lounges across the country about preparing students for real-world challenges. A month after the flight, Maya received an invitation to speak at a corporate leadership conference. The topic wasn't medical, it was about breaking barriers and leading with expertise. Her story had transcended the medical field to become a beacon for professional excellence in any industry. The patient from the flight made a full recovery and became an advocate for better medical equipment on airplanes. He and his wife stayed in touch with Maya, sending her holiday cards each year with updates on their growing family. Their grandchildren grew up hearing the story of the amazing doctor on the plane. Warner's company did follow through on their diversity initiatives, with Maya serving as an advisor to their medical technology division. Under her guidance, they developed new emergency response tools for airlines, potentially helping future travelers in similar situations. The flight crew created a training video based on the incident, using it to teach new staff members about handling difficult situations with professionalism. Linda, the flight attendant, was promoted to crew trainer, where she shared her experience of watching dignity triumph over discrimination. Maya's hospital created a mentorship program matching experienced doctors with young medical professionals facing similar challenges. The program quickly became a model for other hospitals, creating a network of support and encouragement across the medical community. 1 year later, at another medical conference, Maya sat in the audience watching the young medical student from the flight give her first presentation. As applause filled the room, Maya remembered her own journey and smiled, knowing that change happens one moment, one person, one flight at a time. The story became more than just a tale of one doctor facing discrimination. It became a lesson about responding to prejudice not with anger, but with excellence. About letting your work speak louder than any prejudice. About the ripple effects of choosing dignity over confrontation. Maya kept the crayon drawing from the little girl on the flight, framing it and hanging it in her office. It served as a reminder that sometimes the biggest changes start with small moments, and that every challenge overcome helps pave the way for others to follow.